Wildcats, Big 12 champion Will Howard.
So excited to announce Kansas City Sports Network's new soccer channel. They're taking advantage of a look that they utilized earlier in the game to show the jet sweep motion.
It's a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise.
You kind of root for guys to have those moments, and that was certainly a big moment.
Welcome into Mizzou, That's Who, your podcast from Missouri Athletics here on KC Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to the Border War podcast.
Welcome back. Another episode of Ain't No Season podcast.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
It's a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC. And I think this is the first time all three of us have been together for a little while. So I'm kind of excited about it. I don't think we've been together in June, all three of us, Maddie.
You know, I think it's perfect that we're all back here. We're redeeming ourselves. We're redeeming our live shows from not having all three of us the same night that Travis Kelce's redeeming himself on the mound. Craig, so you ready to break that down, buddy?
Yeah, we can absolutely. As a matter of fact, now this feels weird, guys. I'm gonna dip. It's just not right with all three of us on this thing. No, I'm so glad to see both of your beautiful faces on my screen at once here. And yes, Travis Kelce definitely redeemed himself, although his plant leg slid on the mound. And I'm glad I'm not. Our guy Joshua Briscoe also made it a point to say that he kind of, gasped a little bit when the plant foot slid. Old habits die hard. I just can't get over the idea that something bad might happen to our beloved Chiefs, even though this group of guys is a two-time world champion right now.
Two-time.
There's three championships within the organization.
This
some would point out.
Two-time champs.
I wonder if Kelsey could just stay on the mound and give the Royals 5 innings. Just eat them up. Go out there, just fill up the zone.
I'm sorry, everybody. I opened up us to this. We didn't really need to talk Royals. We didn't need to talk baseball. And I opened the floodgates. I apologize. I take responsibility for leading us down this dark path.
Well, I'm going to take us down another dark path. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and take a sip if you are so inclined. By the way, Craig, I really like your background. It just looks absolutely fantastic. I am very much enjoying the new digs.
Hey, thanks, buddy. I'm enjoying the new digs too. There's mountains right out the window. It's great.
Yeah, you don't have to rub it in, bro. Come on. It does. It looks fantastic. I like the backlighting and all that stuff too. But we got a big day today. Obviously mini camps are happening. You saw the photo shoot starting today. There's going to be, some, kind of similar to OTAs. You're going to see some highlights. You're going to see some stuff there, but I think there's some stuff worth discussing here a little bit about, OTAs, what to expect, who's in, who's out. Like these are all things worth paying attention to. And I think the big story off the top is Chris Jones. There's no deal yet in place for Chris Jones. I don't think that's all too surprising. It's only June. It's only early June. But whether or not he shows up, I think is going to be, just it's a mile marker. I think Minicamp's a mile marker when it comes to, the Chris Jones discussion. And real quick before we get into it too much, the reason that it's kind of a mile marker is OTAs are optional. You're not required to be there. I think there's probably a little wink, wink, nod, nod. We want you there kind of stuff. I think Andy Reid would obviously prefer his team to be there, but it's not the end of the world. Mandatory minicamp. It's mandatory. It's in the title. Mandatory minicamp. There are fines that can be incurred if players are not showing up for these. And so with Chris Jones and his contract in question, it's worth looking to see if Chris Jones even shows up, Matthew.
Yeah, it's definitely a big moment in contract negotiations once you get to this kind of part of the offseason program, and certain players in certain moments use this as leverage to say, hey, I'm not showing up until you pay me. Other players just kind of show up and still say, I'm here willing to work. Chris Jones is at the point to where, like, I don't know if I particularly care one way or the other, right? Like, he's really good. Being there isn't going to tell me that he's more dedicated or not more dedicated. Skipping it isn't going to tell me that he wants to be on the Chiefs or doesn't want to be on the Chiefs. I get why it's something worth discussing, and I fully understand, like, it is a big marker for the offseason. It's just, I just don't think it matters much for him and his situation.
No, it definitely doesn't. Chris Jones skipped mandatory minicamp in 2019 as well. Like, this is not the first time that this sort of thing has happened. Yes, he does get fined. Basically, it's 3 days worth of work here that he gets fined for. The total this year is going to be $98,753 in total if he misses all 3 practices. For Chris, that's not that's not something that's going to prevent him. It didn't prevent him last time, and he hadn't made anything but his rookie deal last time. He certainly banked a little bit more money here. And I mean, he's got a big payday coming up here. He's got a big, contract this year in his base salary. He's going to get paid again. I'm not worried about it. However, I am curious to see if he does go ahead and show up. I mean, I know that Chris himself has not necessarily said one way or another, hey, I'm coming to camp. Hey, I'm not coming to camp. All we've heard for most of the offseason is sign my guy, Frank Clark. And that didn't happen. He went ahead and he signed with Denver. Then we got a little bit of an Instagram video where he said, the clock's ticking, essentially indicated that. Does that mean that the clock's ticking towards the beginning of the season? Does that mean the clock's ticking, time to get a contract done? It remains to be seen. But I'm with Maddie here. Chris Jones not being at minicamp, the only thing that means potentially is that he might be a little bit disgruntled with this organization for not getting something done. It's not going to affect his play on the field if he misses these 3 days. He will be in training camp 100%. He will be there. But this does maybe indicate a little bit of I'm not super happy with the organization right now, even though he's got a big base salary this year.
Yeah, I don't think it's a concern at all with Chris Jones' on-field performance because he misses 3 days of minicamp.
Nah.
The thing that I'm most fascinated with when it comes to this is the tenor of the conversation around whether or not Chris Jones shows up. If Chris Jones shows up, it's good faith. It's, hey, things are progressing well. We feel good about where this is headed. It's just, I think it's a positive indicator that something will be getting done sooner rather than later. Let's say that. If he's there, I think, this thing is getting done. If it's not getting done, I don't think it's a red flag. It's the end of the world, but I think it'll be interesting to see the tenor surrounding it. Because this is, like I said, it's a mile marker. It's a storyline. It's a conversation that's going to happen if he doesn't show up. And, the tenor, we're going to get to hear from some angles in reports around the NFL about how things are going with the Chris Jones negotiations. If Chris Jones is indeed not there, we're going to hear, hey, Chris Jones isn't going to be attending this minicamp as the team and him are in negotiations about a new rework deal, an extension to keep him in Kansas City beyond this season. But what I'm more interested in is the sentence after that. It's, that the team really they really haven't had a lot of conversations yet, or is it, they're deep into discussion, or is it, that Chris Jones is waiting out the market. He's waiting to see some of these other defensive tackles get paid. I'm curious to see the angles that are presented more than I am necessarily. There's nothing that's red flaggy to me. I don't think. It's more, I'm just very interested in the tenor and the reports that come out if he does do that and what those reports can tell us about the process and the negotiations.
For me, I'm more curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. It's something you said. If he shows up, you guys think that means that he's close to signing? You don't think he's just going to show up because he's supposed to show up? Like, you don't think that they can be not close, still completely negotiating, and he still just shows up just because he's now the leader of the room, he's taken on this responsibility, yada, 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 going forward? Like, do you think it actually means something if he shows up?
Yeah, I think that's a good faith thing. I really do think so. Even if it is just from the standpoint of, listen, I know I got 1 year left. I'm going to be playing this year. Why not help out the young guys? Why not be that leader voice in the locker room? I think that Chris Jones is definitely not this guy, but I think that earlier in his career, there were some that kind of viewed him as maybe a little more immature, maybe a guy that wasn't necessarily a locker room leader. They brought in a lot of locker room leaders over the top of him, or had other guys that were entrenched there when he was drafted. This year, they very clearly are making it a point to say, hey, listen, you are the leader on that defensive line. We're not going out. We're not getting another guy. Please show up and be that leader. So I think that if he does show up, Matty, to your point, I do think that it means something from the perspective of, his maturity, his ability to say, hey, listen, I'm ready to be this guy. I am here. Even if you're far apart on negotiations, him showing up and saying, I'm willing to take this on and be this guy like I was last year. We got to see it last year for certain, especially on the sidelines there. Being that guy, I think, means a lot to this organization. And it also maybe kind of smooths over any little bumps in the negotiations that may still be there.
Yeah, no, if he's there, I think it's wonderful signs about everything across the board. I think I'm anticipating he's not going to be there. This is guess. If he's there, then I think Chiefs fans should be absolutely thrilled. I think that's a very, very positive indicator on where these negotiations are heading. Because we know that there is some desire to get a deal done with him. There's a desire for Chris Jones' side that wants a new deal. This isn't new. This is a discussion point that's been happening all off season. A lot of the way the cap looks currently and the limited avenues to be able to create flexibility just to have some buffer for the season. I mean, there's really not too many avenues outside of a Chris Jones extension, really, realistic ones. It's a Travis Kelsey restructure of some kind, or it's a Chris Jones extension. Those are the two logical ways that they can really create a little bit of cap space to finish signing their rookie class, to have that little buffer that they prefer in their in season. So yeah, if I will be very happy to see Chris Jones, because I think that means that something's getting done sooner rather than later. I think that's a very positive indicator for how the process is going for this. You look like you want to jump in, both.
Yeah,
I
want to touch on this question from Sophia here about how does Mahomes feel, let's say, if they don't re-sign Chris Jones after Mahomes takes a rather large discount overall on his contract. The Chiefs are unable to spend the big money to keep Tyreek Hill. If they're unable, whatever it is, to spend the big money to keep Chris Jones, or Chris Jones isn't willing to take a little bit of a pay cut like, say, Mahomes was, what do you think that kind of plays out as in the locker room? Do you think Mahomes gets frustrated maybe with Jones if he's not willing to take less money? Do you think he gets frustrated with the team if they're unable to keep the other stars around? How do we think that dynamic plays out if the Chiefs aren't going to go up to Aaron Donald-esque money for Jones, and it sounds like other teams will, or that's what he wants?
I mean, I look at it this way. As long as he's still getting to hoist around that Lombardi and walk around with it, he's not going to care too terribly much. I think that when we see, I'm guilty of it as well. Worrying about locker room dynamics, worrying about stuff like that. That stuff does matter, but it matters more when you're not as good and you're not living up to expectations and you're not achieving the goals that you want to achieve. As long as this team is a couple plays away from winning Super Bowls, from being in Super Bowls, just consistently in the AFC Championship game, being amongst the elite, it's hard to get too picky, even as a player there within the organization. Now, that being said, yes, I can see that there. Let's say the season doesn't go as good as they hope here. They're on the outside looking in the playoffs. They're obviously in the playoffs, but they don't get to go as far as they want to. Yeah, maybe some of those conversations come up again. And yeah, maybe when Mahomes is talking about the new rework deal, he looks at it and he says, hey, listen, remember when I cut you guys some slack here and I allowed all this movement of this money and all of this, and then we let Tyreek Hill we let him go in a trade because we weren't willing to pay. We let Chris Jones go because we weren't willing to pay. We let Orlando Brown Jr. go because we weren't willing to pay. Those conversations will happen if that is the case. Now, that being said, we do have a third kind of viewpoint here from Frank Clark coming off of all of this stuff. There's some comments. I guess
we'll
we can get into
those.
that.
We'll get to those in a minute,
but
Craig.
Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to jump.
He's jumping. I want to close this out real quick, and we'll get to some of the Frank comments and some of the stuff.
Yeah.
But we kind of have the blueprint for how things have went with some of these big ticket negotiations and Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs were very upfront with Patrick Mahomes about the Tyreek Hill situation. They had the conversations. They were very transparent. They were very open with him about the expectations and where things were standing. Patrick, he was fine with, the move for, moving on, understood the issues with all that stuff. And hey, look, they messed around and won the Super Bowl. So there's a blueprint for how this team has handled that. Can you do it again though? How many times can you go to that well? How many times can you continue? Like, obviously they won the Super Bowl. How many times can you continue to do that kind of business? Like, yes, you're being transparent with them, but you're going to continue to not pay guys. Now, obviously, there's two sides of that story because there's the Chris side that's going to want to get paid. So there's that, right? But also, I think that's worth paying attention to. But I think one thing is interesting. You heard Patrick Mahomes earlier talk about, his contract and not worrying about it too much and wanting to get paid or wanting to get guys around him taken care of, like Chris Jones and a few other guys we're going to talk about right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Craig, did you know that Frank Clark went on a podcast with Josina Anderson?
I did not know this. What?
Yes. Yes, he did. And we will talk about that right after we tell you really quick about the KCSN golf tournament. It is going to be hitting July 29th. We are very, very excited for the second edition of the Tacos and Bourbon golf tournament. You heard that right. Tacos and Bourbon on July 29th at Sunflower Hills Golf Course in Bonner Springs, Kansas. That's where it was last year. There will be drinks and food provided thanks to our sponsors, Holladay, Distillery, and Mission Taco, along with prizes, giveaways, a silent auction, and more. Plus, one golfer will have a chance to sink a shot for $1 million. For more information or to sign up, click on the link in the description of this show. For any sponsorship inquiries, you can also reach out to our guy, Christian Gumminger, at kcsnfoundation@gmail.com. It is going to be so much fun. We cannot wait for the second annual edition of this. Make sure you get your teams signed up early. Just make sure you get that spot. I believe it's $500 a team. Ask anybody who went last year, and they will tell you how great of a time that they had doing this this last year. So we cannot wait. I cannot wait. I missed last year. If you remember, I got COVID. Bad things happened. And I missed it, but I'm very excited to
Maddie and I just drove the golf cart or the beer cart around the entire time. And that definitely was a very tame time the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing bad.
Very calm.
There are some
Very
rumors. Cool. There are some rumors swirling around that I might be on that golf cart this year.
Ooh,
Yeah.
you.
Sources have indicated that I could be on that golf cart this year. Anyways, Craig, I cut you off from getting too far into the Frank Clark conversations with Josina Anderson because I there's some interesting comments. I know you had some interesting some comments that you heard from him in that podcast that you thought were quite interesting. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just kind of start with some of these. Obviously, Frank Clark comes out and all this. There's no hard feelings in any of this. As a matter of fact, he says, like he was due like $25 million, told his agent, you do the talking. He basically just gave him the scoop from the team. And the team said, we are trying to get something done with a few other guys on the team. And Frank said, I'm with you. I understand fully if it comes. And Beach essentially says, if it comes around a free agency and we can work something out later on, let's stay in contact and we can work something out. And that was basically the gist of the conversation. Frank never got an offer. They never made a formal offer there. And the way that Frank is viewing it, he knows that the offer would have been low. And so rather than insult him with an offer, they decided they just wait in the process, see how it all works. But the key of all of that is we are trying to get something done with a few other guys on the team. That was super interesting in all of this, because if I look back at the entire way that this offseason has formulated and the things that they have tried to do with this team, on the team specifically, there's nobody that they've taken care of right now on the team. They let Orlando Brown Jr. walk with essentially without a contract. And if there was a contract, it was super low. That one may have been insulting. We don't know what it was. We just know that they were not offering a quote unquote market value contract. The NFL wasn't.
I think Orlando might have been insulted by the contract he actually signed with the Bengals before the season.
He may have.
I'm just gonna say that because
point being, they weren't trying to take care of Orlando Brown Jr. That definitely wasn't the case. That leaves really two guys that they can come to the table with already and make these moves, and it's Chris Jones and it's L'Jarius Sneed. I mean, those are the two guys that you're looking at, and the two guys that make sense there. So Frank's telling you that there's contracts coming here, Ken.
Before Matty gets in, like I want to tie it back to what I said before the break. So we talked about the Tyreek Hill situation. Patrick Mahomes, very connected. Patrick Mahomes is part of the conversations. They're very transparent with Patrick Mahomes. When he got asked about his contract situation, he singled out three guys: Travis Kelsey, L'Jarius Sneed, Chris Jones. I mean, I feel like those are the guys that you might see some things done for. Like, I feel like that's the list of guys that they're prioritizing. Maddie, you jump in, but I have some more thoughts on that, but I'll let you jump in here.
I mean, I think L'Jarius Sneed's one obvious. Okay, so we talked about Chris Jones already, right? I do think the Chiefs want to get something done. I think Chris wants to get something done. I think we kind of all know where we all stand on that one. L'Jarius Sneed's interesting because I really feel like I can make a case to definitely sign him long-term, to extend him, to get that locked up. And I think I can make a case that you maybe shouldn't. I think I could honestly see both sides of it, because you're going to pay him a whole lot of money. And I think you're going to be, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, you're going to be eking up into the money where you're talking about like legitimate shutdown corners. And I don't know if Sneed has proven to be that. His value hasn't been as a shutdown corner. It's been as a slot defender that does a lot of stuff really well, rather than just shut down number one wide receivers. Late last year, he did showcase that maybe he does have some potential to grow into that, but then not being a super young third-year player or fourth-year player in the NFL. I just get it from both sides of his. So, like, I don't know. I think it's interesting that both Frank Clark and Mahomes now have mentioned kind of Sneed's name, kind of going into a possible extension with the Chiefs. I think even more interesting is Travis Kelsey. He's clearly still under contract, right? He's not going anywhere. He's going to play I think he's going to play all of his games, in the NFL as a Chief.
Yes.
The thing is, though, he's still wildly kind of underpaid compared to, just like every other tight end that's going on right now. If they did want to float him some money to push it out even farther, I think he's under contract to 2025 right now. You could push that out a little farther, save yourself a little bit of money now, give him a little bonus for now the fact that he is your clear-cut number one, not your 1A or 1B, however you want to slice it with Tyreek Hill. I actually think there's a little bit of logic, and like you can see the path going to that too. So I want to ask you, what's more likely? You had to pick one or the other. A Travis Kelsey extension this offseason or a L'Jarius Sneed extension this offseason?
Oh, man, that is so loaded because Travis Kelsey is currently signed through age 36. That's a long time for a tight end to be playing. It really is. This team does not like to hand out big contracts to older players, even if it's the greatest tight end to ever play the game of football. And they already have him for the next 3 seasons. It's not like we're talking about, okay, Travis Kelsey is going to be 36 next year. He's not showing any signs of really slowing down tremendously. So let's go ahead and lock him up for a couple more years. You don't know what's going to happen with Travis Kelsey over the next 3 years. And you don't know what he realistically wants to do. He's starting to expand the media mogul stuff. He's starting to get into that. He's doing more TV work. He is doing the podcast. This media stuff is definitely forefront of his mind. He's clearly setting himself up for his post-football career. How many more hits? How much more pain does he want to take? Even though these are rings, and even though, again, like I just said before the break, winning cures a lot of that stuff. A bad season or two all of a sudden kind of changes some of that and makes you want to walk away a little bit more, makes you feel like, hey, listen, I've accomplished a lot. I am the greatest tight end to ever play the game. I know it. We all know it. So from that regard, with Brett Veach's history and what they have under contract with him right now, I think L'Jarius Sneed is the more likely candidate just because I think they'll want that guy in the room with what Spagnuolo does in that secondary. I think he is a very key weapon. So I do think if I have to choose between those two, it's just going to be Sneed.
Do you think I don't know if it's going to be an extension for Travis Kelsey, but maybe a restructure to give him more money up front and then maybe
that makes more sense. Maybe
I think that's the thing that makes the more sense is giving him more money now. I think that's what could be the move. They could restructure his contract, create bigger cap hits. They could technically. So here's how I don't. If the Chiefs, let's say that they restructured Travis Kelsey's contract in 2023, give him more cash up front. That's their buffer. That'll put him at $8 million in cap space for the remainder. For going into the season, if they were to restructure Travis Kelsey's contract in 2025, that still creates an out for them where it would be 2.5, I believe, in dead money, and saving of $17 million in change. You can redo a deal there, or you can start redoing deals there to try to maybe give him a little bit more cash later in his career and do some stuff there. So the Travis Kelsey restructure is the thing I'm paying attention to more than I am necessarily an extension for him. I don't think they'll do an extension, but I could see them paying him a little bit more cash up front now and then starting to think about maybe making some moves for his contract later. Well, the L'Jarius Sneed thing's interesting. I'm curious if he's there at mandatory minicamp. I'm going to anticipate he was there, but I know he missed some OTA stuff. He's been working on the side due to some health stuff. I don't think he's got any leverage to try to hold out. So I think he's going to be there. But it's worth noting that it feels like they might be, it's worth paying attention to him as a candidate. The thing with the L'Jarius Sneed, contract though, it doesn't help them with cap space at all. It actually could hurt him. I mean, it could technically. He's due I'm looking it up real quick. I mean, he's only due, $2.9 million this year.
Yeah, it's a low amount. You have to sequence that with Chris Jones first. You just can't clear the cap space.
That's not a money clearing move. I mean, they could probably structure it in a way, judging by what we've seen in this front office, that they don't need to make any money to do it. But that's not a cap clearing move. You're not saving any cap space this year by messing with L'Jarius Sneed's contract. And that's why that's an interesting one that you would think if that one was to happen, there's no reason that couldn't have happened already, I guess, is the other thought of that. The Chiefs like to do things like this at this time of year, right? They like to wait till June or July. Just structurally, there was not a reason that one has to wait or could wait, or there's this rush to do it now.
Could be cash. Could be cash flow.
Oh, if they're doing Chris Jones, they're about to spend a lot of extra cash. So.
Yeah. I'm just saying, timing of the NFL calendar, there could be some cash questions about, I don't know the account. I don't know the books of the Chiefs. I'm just saying there is. I don't, unfortunately. I'd love to know. I'd love to know post 2017 versus. We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Leave a 5-star review. Take a sip. Sign up for the golf tournament. That's what I'm gonna use moving.
But by the end of all of this, Kent, like we're gonna be 2 years down the road here, and the entire podcast is just going to be this segment coming back from a break. We're just gonna do all of the rundown of everything, all the calls to action, and then we're just gonna immediately go to another break.
Just gonna keep adding them. Donate to Therez's scholarship.
Kid's perfect show. That is Kid's perfect show. Just intro to break to close.
Just a tight 3.5 minutes. We're not even getting 35 anymore. We're going 3.5 minutes.
Ugh.
But appreciate everybody hanging out. It's fun to be back with these guys. It's fun to be all together again, reunited, and it feels so good. All that good stuff. Obviously, we're talking a little bit about mandatory mini camps here. You know, we're not going to get a ton of information. It's not going to be much different than the OTAs. You might get a few storylines with the Chris Jones and some of the contract stuff. Again, it's going to be interesting. Like the thing I keep thinking about and paying attention to is just the receiver group. Like I've just been thinking about that group a lot. I've seen some conversations and looking some stuff up about Kadarius Toney. Because there's some comments on Twitter today. Do you realize he only played 20 snaps twice in his time in Kansas City? He played over 20 snaps twice in Kansas City, and he's good. Like the thing that brought up is Ian Hartitz mentioning that like basically like per route run he was like one of the most efficient and most targeted receivers in the NFL after he
with
joined
one
the
of the
Chiefs.
lowest ADOTs.
Yeah, that's true, but still plenty of targets. I'm super excited to watch Kadarius Toney, but like even just like getting through this week healthy, like just continuing. Just it's
Brett Veach said it. Yeah,
it's a mile marker, man. It's a mile marker. This is the last big time we're gonna get to see this team together before training camp. They're gonna get a little time off after this, but. Like this is a mile marker towards, hey, you want to be wide receiver one. You want to be our guy. We want you to be our guy. Getting through some of this stuff, is going to be important for him. And I don't know. I continually fascinated by this receiver group. There's a couple other guys I want to talk about again, but Kadarius Toney, I'll start with it. He only broke 20 snaps twice last year. He missed 3 games almost immediately after becoming a Chief. But man, it's so tempting to just go on and be excited about seeing him in a Chiefs uniform and hoping he can get to 7 games, even though there's a lot of hope involved, Maddie.
I think that there's a gap between like being excited to watch Kadarius Toney in a Chiefs uniform, because we saw last year why you're excited for that. The high end flashes, the punt returns, some of the yards after the catch stuff, some of the ability on the sluggo to adjust his glove and then go up and make the catch over a defensive back. The flashes are there. There's a reason to be excited that he's in a Chiefs uniform. There's also a huge reason to not think that this guy's going to get 125 targets or something like that in an NFL year, because he has 77 targets in the NFL. He's missed multiple games every single season. Even when he is healthy, he's a guy that's never really like 100% healthy on game day. He's always been in the NFL so far, always dealing with something, always dealing with a little something. You can track that back to his time at Florida too. So you can be excited for what he can bring to the Chiefs. You can be excited for him to be used in this limited role where he maybe plays 20 snaps and gets some manufactured touches, gets a high usage on those 20 snaps because it's manufactured stuff, or it's putting him in position to do the most with them like they did last year. But you aren't going to have the expectation that he is going to be a dominant, consistent wide receiver one week in and week out. Because again, he has just never been that guy. He hasn't shown the ability to stay on the field and do that. And he hasn't really shown the ability to be a 3-level threat as a wide receiver. This goes back to Florida with the Giants, with the Chiefs, just not there. So I think there's room for both. And I don't think anything in the offseason is going to change my kind of expectations or excitement for him. I'm still going to be excited to see what he does, but I'm still going to have expectations that have a hard cap on them based on his history and what we have seen from him over the last 6 years playing football.
Yep, spot on with all of that. And that's why the concern about the wide receiver room is a little bit there, because you look outside of Kadarius Toney, you have Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Hey, sure, he's a guy that's there. He's a veteran presence. We'll see how he looks in year 2 of the Kansas City system, but year 1 was largely what we saw at Green Bay. There's some highlight reel moments. There's some vertical ability. There's also some stuff that you look at and you're like, wow, some concentration drops, some inefficiency, some things like that. Not a guy that you're looking at and you're going, okay, clear wide receiver one right there. You got Travis Kelsey. We talked about him already just a little bit ago. He's going to be fine. But then the rest of the wide receiver room is a bunch of unknowns or guys that are hurt often, rookies, players that are, maybe role players from most of their career. Like, that's where the question marks lie in all of this. Yes, it's good to be excited about Sky Moore. Yes, it's good to be excited about Rashee Rice, who we think is going to be at minicamp, even though he doesn't have a contract yet, which is weird because everybody else in the draft class does. But it's good to be excited about all of those guys. And it's also good to temper expectations about what that wide receiver room can be, because those guys haven't really shown it on the NFL field yet. Yes, they can. Yes, they can step in. Yes, they can make that progress. But as it stands right now, going into minicamp, Kadarius Toney being healthy is arguably the single most important thing of this entire wide receiver room, short of signing a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, who at this point, I think if the Chiefs were that interested in him and thought that they absolutely needed a wide receiver, he'd already be in Kansas City. The fact that he's not, and he's advertising that he's taking all these, all these visits and everything like that, Chiefs are clearly not in on him at the contract that he wants. So yes, Kadarius Toney, his health, his availability this season, and his availability through minicamp is the single most important storyline, I think, on offense, if you ask me.
I'm a sicko. And
yeah,
for various reasons. This time I'm a sicko because I was watching Chiefs Seahawks last night. I was watching the all-22 of it. I was watching just I like
been there.
Yeah, I know. I was just watching, and Maddie, I think I agree with you. Like, there might have been a little bit of a lack of trust with Sky Moore and his understanding, his knowledge of the playbook. Maybe a little bit of lack of trust.
The amount of times that they have two wide receivers and one of them is Sky Moore on top of each other on critical downs down the stretch in the regular season and in the playoffs is not a low number.
There was this interesting stretch. Though, that was just kind of interesting to me. It was, there's a play, Sky Moore is wide open in the flat, and Mahomes still throws like in double coverage to Kelsey on a little hitch route over the ball. Just refuses to throw this. Sky might have scored. Like, he might have scored.
Interesting.
The very next play, the little RPO action, they throw the ball out in a little bubble route to Sky Moore, and he goes and makes four guys miss. Great after the catch, nice little play. It was just this interesting these two contrasting plays, these contrasting moments where, the flat might have been the move with Sky there, that play. Maybe he didn't trust it. The very next play goes back to a bubble RPO or some kind of little RPO play or screen play or something, and Sky does something, makes things happen.
I mean, they clearly did design stuff to get Sky Moore involved. So I'm not, I want to be very clear. This wasn't like a, hey, he doesn't know what he's doing or anything like that kind of remark from Kent or I here. I went back recently and rewatched a lot of third down passing plays. And I think I said it when Craig and I were talking last week. I don't want to say it's on any particular person because I don't know the call. I just know there were multiple plays on third downs where two wide receivers kind of ended up on top of each other. And that is not how football route distribution is supposed to work. On a couple of them, a receiver noticed it and had to sprint away in something that didn't even resemble a route anymore. And so and it happened on more than one occasion. So, and one of the common denominators was a young rookie wide receiver being involved in a couple of these. Now, I'm not saying he was always at fault. He could have been the one that recognized it, or it could have been a veteran that recognized he was in the wrong spot. It was happening a fair amount. I do think there was a level of, I don't know if we can trust everybody that's a wide receiver. This goes beyond Sky Moore now. I don't know if we can trust all these wide receivers 1 through 5, 1 through 6 to be the third read and then be in the right spot at the right time. If they're the first read, sure. Because then if they're not in the right spot, you move on. You can't put Sky Moore on the backside, have him be your third or fourth part of the progression and know you're going to go to him if you don't have that trust, if it hasn't been built up yet. And I don't know if the Chiefs have that in Moore, Toney, Justin Watson got there. I mean, that's why he played, right? Justin Watson got there. He got that trust. It doesn't mean that he's the third or whatever best wide receiver. He just got to that point. So what we need to see, and I don't think minicamp will tell us that, but the Chiefs need to develop that rapport with more than just a guy or two on this wide receiver room right now, because I don't know how many guys have it besides Travis Kelce.
I mean, we've seen it in the past. Like, Demarcus Robinson got a lot of snaps for this team. a lot of snaps over guys like McCall Hardman that we would look at and be like, yeah, that dude's a better football player. He's got better, traits and everything like that. And Demarcus was the guy. And they targeted him in some crucial moments because he was in the right spot. I don't know that anybody would look at Demarcus Robinson and say, okay, that dude is, this elite football. He's an elite football player. He's in the NFL, but like the best of the best of the best sorts of wide receivers that, Patrick Mahomes has ever played with. But playing within the structure of the offense, making sure that your spacing is right, making sure that you understand where you're supposed to be with different leverages from cornerback, safeties, things like that matters so much to not just Andy Reid's offense, but every single offense in the NFL. And if there's a guy that's on top of another guy or in somebody else's space, now all of a sudden you're not wrong because you're doing this. You're also making Travis Kelce wrong. And now all of a sudden the entire structure of the play falls apart, and it just matters so much there. So a guy like Kadarius Toney, who clearly does understand some of those things. We've seen some of that. It is not like he's, again, this elite route runner that's going to break somebody off and has this, super diverse route tree, but he does understand spacing. He does understand where to be comparatively to other guys. That's why it's so important, because he does have those athletic traits. He does have that ability to be a game breaker and take something to the house that maybe other guys can't. And he doesn't mess up the play. He doesn't create problems for other players when they're running those routes. So again, very important that players like that are healthy and available.
I'm just super interesting to see how this receiver room shakes out. Fascinating if there's going to be any context clues worth paying attention to during the mandatory minicamp this week. Maddie, you had one more thing before we get out of here?
Yeah. I mean, it's the offensive line. It's always the offensive line. And I don't think we've touched on it yet. Last week, there was a picture, a very deliberate picture posted by the Chiefs and the offensive linemen. And it was 5 starting offensive linemen. Not
right, in exact order.
Left to right, in exact order. They weren't lining up for a play. They were not on the field during practice. They clearly stood off to the side and took this picture with Donovan Smith at left tackle and Jawan Taylor at right tackle. All the vast majority of the pictures we have seen coming out of various OTAs were that same alignment, or Wanya Morris stepping in at left tackle for Donovan Smith with the first team occasionally. I think Nick Allegretti actually got some first team reps too in place of Joe Thuney, which isn't, obviously not a replacement that is happening, but it was more of the picture, right? The picture of them not actively during practice, but staging it, standing there and posing for it in this very specific way. Not saying it kind of locks the deal up, but it's getting a little shaky up here on the Chiefs starting offensive 5 isn't set, and that they are going to put the best tackle at left tackle stance that some of us on this podcast may have been taking.
Yes, definitely. That picture came out, and Matty buried the lead there. The most surprising thing there, yes, Joe Thuney will be your starting left guard. I know that everybody was worried about that. That was the thing that you looked at and you just went, okay, like very clearly coming off the side there, taking your helmets off, grouping up in that organization, taking a picture for it to be posted online. That is about as deliberate as you can possibly get with saying, hey, listen,
look at him.
This is our starting offensive line right now. Like, yeah, lots of things could change, but guess what, guys? This is it. Like, there's no other way to interpret it other than these are the guys that we're trusting to go in, at least to minicamp and camp, as the starting offensive lineman. So, yeah, Maddie's right. We didn't talk about that last week when it was posted, but very clear indicator that Donovan Smith going to be your left tackle, Jawan Taylor going to be your right tackle, and Wanya Morris maybe getting some exercise at left tackle. So maybe that's a left tackle of the future sort of thing, which makes that pick a little bit better. But it still leaves more questions than answers until we get to see them line up on the field.
I don't really have a ton of complaints about the Wanya Morris pick anyway. You gotta plan
sure.
ahead.
Yeah.
Like I like it, whether or not he's starting this year or not. Like there wasn't even a guarantee he was going to start this year or not. Left tackle move for him is quite interesting. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to do it. I think it's going to be Donovan Smith at left tackle. I don't know how I feel about it. We'll find out.
It's also worth mentioning, Jawan Taylor has yet again said that he feels comfortable sliding over to left tackle if need be in a game. If he needs to play, it was specifically asked, and he was like, "Hey, I feel comfortable if I have to play left tackle in a game sliding over." I think even the way he answered that question says, "I am playing right tackle,
Sliding.
but I can go do left." So yeah, I mean, I think you're getting the Donovan Smith left tackle, Jawan Taylor right tackle, and like, hey. Hopefully it works, but yeah, it's also, I think it's very clear, and this would have been the case either way, right? This would have been the case regardless of the Chiefs starting offensive tackle situation. If you want to sit here in the middle of the summer and point to what might be an Achilles heel of this team, I think having Donovan Smith after his last season of football, I get it. It was marred with injuries, but let's, outside of one season, he wasn't great. You can point to a pretty clear Achilles heel already. And as we sit here in June, and if things go badly, it might very well start with the offensive line position, specifically at offensive tackle.
And it's not going to be because I don't think it's going to be the other four. I like the other four.
Yeah.
I think it's just there's one question mark there that's pretty big, and it can wreck a game if you're not careful. So we'll see. I think we've kind of said this before. Some of this talk could be an indication more of a Lucas Niang and a rookie right tackle too. Like just because, the tape on Donovan Smith hasn't been good, and we've heard all offseason that they were planning on moving Jawan Taylor to left tackle. There just may not be a good enough replacement there to warrant moving. Maybe you can say whatever you want about Lucas Niang, but if Jawan Taylor did indeed practice left tackle for part of this offseason and then they decided not to, well, that tells you something about Lucas Niang. At least they're not giving him a shot there. They'd rather give it to Donovan Smith, who was signed after the draft. I mean, there's some things worth paying attention to there. It may just simply be that they believe that this is going to be their best five. They don't have a ton of confidence in a Wanya Morris. They don't have a ton of confidence in a Lucas Niang either. So
at least initially in Wanya Morris.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're not taking him top 100 and be like, we're out.
Mind.
Haven't even seen him we haven't even seen him with pads on, but we're out. But we are out. That's going to do it for the KC Laboratory. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll catch you later.